The crack of skin against skin echoed like a gunshot through the plush silence of first class. Gasps rippled across the cabin. Flight attendant Karen Doyle, face tight with self-righteous fury, had just struck passenger Nyla Carter across the cheek. The force whipped Nyla's head to the side, leaving a bright red imprint on her dark skin. "Animals like you don't belong in first class," Karen sneered, ripping the boarding pass from Nyla's hand and tearing it to shreds. The fragments fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. Passengers froze. For a moment, even the steady hum of the aircraft's systems seemed to hold its breath. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward Nyla, who stood in simple jeans and worn sneakers, her messenger bag slung across her shoulder. To them, she looked ordinary. Too ordinary for a $2,000 seat in first class. "Pick it up," Karen ordered, jabbing a manicured finger toward the carpet. "On your knees. Crawl back where you belong." Phones appeared in trembling hands, lenses rising like a forest of judgment. Some passengers filmed with gleeful anticipation, others with a twisted sense of civic duty. A whispered comment drifted across the aisle. "Finally, someone's handling these scammers properly." Nyla did not kneel. She did not stoop for the shredded paper. She simply stood, the sting of the slap still burning her cheek, her chest rising and falling in steady defiance. Karen's anger escalated at Nyla's refusal. Rage thrummed beneath her uniform, amplifying her voice into a shriek. "Did you not hear me? Get down and pick up your fake ticket." She shoved Nyla against the leather seat, her words laced with venom. "Criminals like you always resist. You make everything worse for yourselves." The word criminals hung heavy in the air, poisonous and deliberate. Behind them, a young woman angled her phone just right. Chloe Hart, lifestyle influencer with perfect blonde curls and designer heels, whispered into her livestream mic, her tone oozing fake concern. "Oh my God, you guys! There's literally a scammer in first class right now. This attendant is handling it flawlessly." The viewer count soared, a digital wildfire spreading in real time. The humiliation was public now, recorded, shared, and amplified beyond the cabin. The comments rolled in. Zero tolerance. Finally, justice. Throw her out. Yet while Karen bathed in the applause of prejudice, Nyla's silence was not weakness. It was calculation. Beneath her calm exterior, she measured the moment like a chess player facing a noisy crowd, letting her opponent make reckless moves. A man in his 60s, dressed in a three-piece suit and gold watch, muttered loudly, "Disgraceful." In my day, people knew their place. His wife clutched her purse tighter, fear disguised as dignity, bias cloaked in pearls. Karen ground the ticket fragments under her heel. She tossed the pieces back at Nyla, triumphant. "There's your first-class seat, sweetheart." Applause rippled through half the cabin. Someone began a slow, mocking clap. But Nyla did not flinch. She brushed the paper scraps from her hair, her eyes steady, her lips pressed in silence. And then, just for an instant, she smiled. It was not the smile of someone defeated. It was not even the smile of someone enduring humiliation. It was the smile of someone who knew something no one else did. Passengers misread it as arrogance. Karen saw it as defiance. Chloe's viewers mocked it in real time. But to Nyla, it was simply the first move in a game no one else knew they were playing. Because in 20 minutes, when the departure clock reached 0, this cabin would learn a truth that would flip every assumption upside down. The woman they had called a scammer, a criminal, a fraud, was the very person who signed the paychecks of everyone on that plane. And she had been watching them all along. For now, though, the slap still rang in the air, the fragments of paper still littered the floor. and the crowd still believed in the performance of prejudice. Karen Doyle straightened her uniform, silver wings gleaming, convinced she had proven herself the gatekeeper of standards. But the gate she thought she was guarding already belonged to the woman she had just struck. The twist was coming, and when it landed, it would shatter careers, destroy reputations, and ignite a revolution at 30,000 feet. The slap should have been the end. Instead, it was only the spark. Nyla Carter stood in the aisle, cheek burning, eyes steady. 30 passengers became jurors, their stares heavy with judgment. The hush of first class felt like a courtroom, the engines humming as a cold gavel. She doesn't belong here. Finally, someone enforcing the rules. Whispers became verdicts. At the front, Peter Lang, gate manager, marched in, tie askew, breath short. "What's happening here, Karen?" Karen Doyle straightened proudly. "Seat fraud. She refused ID, got hostile." She gestured toward Nyla with the flair of a prosecutor. Peter didn't look at Nyla's face, only her clothes. Plain jeans, discount t-shirt, sneakers worn thin. He saw not a customer, but a trespasser. Boarding pass and ID. Now. "She destroyed my pass," Nyla said calmly. Karen's laugh sliced the air, because it was fake. Passengers chuckled with her. Chloe Hart, influencer with flawless hair and designer heels, leaned into her live stream. "Oh my God, you guys! A scammer tried sneaking into first class." Her viewer count surged past 2,000. Comments filled the feed. "Ban her. Throw her out. Attendant is a hero." An elderly man muttered, "Disgraceful." His wife clutched her purse, whispering, "I don't feel safe." Small words. Heavy poison. Nyla stood silent. Her stillness made Karen angrier. Peter grabbed his radio. "Ground control, Flight 228. Security response to Gate 41C. Fraudulent passenger. Disorderly conduct." Some passengers applauded. Actually applauded. Karen seized the stage. "This is why flights are delayed. People who lie and cheat their way into luxuries they haven't earned." Applause spread wider. Nyla reached slowly into her messenger bag. The cracked leather creaked, the brass buckle glinting under the cabin lights. Chloe gasped for her stream. "She's reaching for something dangerous. Hands where I can see them," Peter barked, voice cracking. Nyla lifted her hand, empty. Her gaze swept the faces staring back, fearful, disgusted, gleeful. Not one held compassion. Heavy boots pounded the aisle. Grant Miller, security officer, arrived with Luis Ortega, airport police. Miller's hand hovered over cuffs. Ortega's eyes narrowed, suspicion already drawn like a weapon. "What's the issue?" Ortega asked. "Fraud," Peter declared confidently. Refused to comply. Forged documents. Ortega studied Nyla's outfit, his expression confirming what bias had already decided. "Ma'am, I need valid ID and boarding pass for seat 2A. She destroyed it. Nyla answered evenly. Karen stepped forward, triumphant. Because it was fake. 20 years on this job, I know a con. She turned to the passengers, voice rising. "You all saw it." "Yes," someone shouted. "Throw her off." Another echoed. Chloe's counter climbed to 5,000. Comments scrolled faster. "Drag her out. No tolerance. She's wasting everyone's time." Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Alan Pierce, silver-haired, uniform heavy with medals, stepped out. His presence silenced the cabin. Authority personified. "What's happening here?" he demanded. Karen wasted no time. "Attempted fraud, Captain. She's non-compliant." Pierce looked at Karen, then Nyla, then back. Judgment fell in a heartbeat. If Karen says it's a problem, then it's a problem. Karen's chest swelled with pride. Peter relaxed, reassured. The passengers nodded as though a verdict had been read. But Nyla? She smiled. That smile, quiet, unsettling, cut through the noise. Viewers mocked it online, passengers muttered about arrogance, Karen bristled at defiance. But Nyla smiled because she knew. The cabin thought they were watching a fraud collapse. In truth, they were players in a test none realized had begun. In less than 15 minutes, every assumption in this room would implode. The woman they dismissed as powerless would reveal herself as the one person who held their futures in her hand. For now, prejudice was celebrated as order. Karen polished her wings like medals. Peter barked into his radio. Chloe whispered for likes. Passengers congratulated themselves for defending standards. And Nyla Carter simply stood there, silent, calm, smiling as the countdown ticked toward revelation. The truth was coming. And when it landed, it would not only shatter reputations, it would ignite a reckoning that would change the skies forever. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin felt electric, buzzing with tension and judgment. Every breath Nyla Carter took was scrutinized, every silence misinterpreted. She stood calm, but around her the storm gathered. Security Officer Grant Miller adjusted his stance, his bulk filling the narrow aisle. Police Officer Luis Ortega scanned Nyla with the wary eyes of a man who had arrested hundreds, already convinced of her guilt. Phones hovered everywhere, lenses drinking in humiliation. Peter Lang, emboldened, stepped closer. "Ma'am, you are now delaying a federal aircraft. You will comply, or you will be removed by force." Nyla didn't move. Karen Doyle took over, her voice rising so all could hear. "This woman is a criminal. She forged her way into first class. She thinks rules don't apply to her. I will not tolerate it." The passengers nodded, muttering approval. Chloe Hart's livestream counter raced toward 7,000, comments scrolling too fast to read. Finally, accountability. She should be banned for life. "Stop wasting time." A middle-aged woman whispered to her husband. "Why don't people like her just stay in their place?" The words slipped out with the casual cruelty of someone who believed the cabin was her private club. Karen jabbed a finger at Nyla. "On your knees." "Now." Nyla didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at Karen with eyes that didn't blink, a gaze so calm it unnerved the crowd. It was the look of someone who saw through every mask, every layer of prejudice, but no one recognized it yet. Peter raised his radio again. "Ground control! Situation escalating! Passenger is resisting removal! Request immediate backup!" The cabin erupted in approval. Applause, claps, cheers. Some filmed themselves clapping, grinning into their cameras like this was reality TV. Nyla remained perfectly still. Then the cockpit door opened again, and the weight of authority filled the aisle. Captain Alan Pierce stepped forward, his uniform catching the cabin lights, medals flashing. For 30 years, passengers had trusted his voice to guide them safely through storms. He stood now not as a pilot, but as judge and jury. "Status?" he asked sharply. Karen snapped to attention. "Fraudulent ticket, non-compliant passenger, escalating behavior." Pierce's jaw tightened. He looked once at Nyla, then turned back to his crew. "If Karen says there's a problem, then there's a problem. Security. Prepare to remove her." Miller's hand closed on his cuffs. Ortega's eyes hardened. The passengers cheered louder. Chloe whispered breathlessly into her phone. "Oh, my God. They're about to drag her out. This is insane." The comments exploded. "Do it. Justice." Finally, But as the storm swirled, Nyla Carter stood unshaken, her heartbeat steady, her voice calm when she finally spoke. "Before you take that step," she said evenly, "consider carefully who you're removing." Her words carried not as a plea, but as a warning. The tone unsettled even Ortega, who hesitated for a moment, cuffs hovering just above her wrists. Karen laughed harshly. "Threats now? You hear that, Captain? Classic scammer behavior. Pretend you're important, pretend you matter." Passengers laughed with her, but the laughter couldn't drown out Nyla's quiet certainty. She did not raise her voice, but it carried in the silence after. "You have no idea who I am." The cabin bristled. A businessman in the front muttered, "God, she's still lying." A college student near the back whispered, "Why isn't she afraid?" Because Nyla wasn't afraid. She was waiting. Pierce's patience thinned. "Enough games. Officers, remove her now." Ortega stepped closer. Miller reached for her arm. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Nyla closed her eyes, as if measuring the moment. Then she opened them and spoke again, her voice like steel under velvet. "You are making a mistake that will cost more than you can imagine." The words froze Miller for half a beat. He'd heard hundreds of excuses, but something in her tone unsettled him. Still, the crowd's pressure pushed him forward. Phones zoomed in. Chloe's viewer count surged past 10,000. Hashtags trended in real time. "First-class fraud, ban her now." Every eye waited for the takedown. But Nyla Carter only smiled. Not the smile of arrogance. Not the smile of weakness. The smile of someone holding a truth so devastating it could flip the entire scene in an instant. The countdown was still running. 14 minutes until departure. 14 minutes until revelation. For now, the cabin believed they were watching a scammer fall. In reality, they were watching themselves. Every prejudice, every assumption, every cruel judgment about to be exposed. And when the truth arrived, it would break louder than any applause. The cabin clock ticked down toward departure, each minute tightening the noose around Nyla Carter. To the passengers, she was a trespasser delaying their flight. To the crew, she was a problem to be neutralized. To the live stream audience, she was a spectacle, a villain in a uniformed morality play. Officer Luis Ortega moved closer, cuffs ready, while Grant Miller shifted his stance, blocking the aisle. Karen Doyle folded her arms with theatrical pride. Peter Lang's radio crackled, his voice booming into it. Passenger refusing removal, proceeding with arrest. The crowd cheered as if justice was being served. Chloe Hart whispered into her phone, her voice gleeful. "You guys! It's happening! They're going to drag her out." Viewer count, 12,000. Comments raced. "Do it now! No excuses! She's wasting everyone's time!" Captain Alan Pierce stood firm. "Remove her! Now!" His voice, once the sound of authority that reassured nervous flyers, had become the gavel sealing her fate. But Nyla didn't move. Her stillness was dissonant. A single unmoving note in a storm of noise. She looked around, at the recording phones, the passengers smirking with superiority, the crew certain of their righteousness. Then she spoke, softly, yet every word carried. "Before you do this," she said, "you should know who you are removing." Laughter erupted. Karen barked. "The only thing we need to know is you forged your way into first class." A businessman shouted, "Just get her off already, I have meetings." A college kid near the back called, "Quit stalling, lady." But Nyla's voice cut through again. Calm, sharp. "You believe I am powerless. You believe the clothes I wear define my worth. But appearances deceive. And in less than 10 minutes, this entire cabin will learn the cost of judging too quickly. The passengers scoffed, but the certainty in her tone made Ortega pause. He frowned, hand hovering near her wrist. Miller leaned in, whispering, "She's bluffing." Karen sneered. "Of course she is. They always bluff." Yet the smile on Nyla's lips unsettled even her. Chloe angled her phone closer. "You guys? She's saying wild stuff. Like she's someone important." The feed exploded with sarcasm. "Yeah, right. Probably thinks she's a princess. Delusional." Captain Pierce had no patience left. "Enough. Officers, remove her immediately." Miller grasped Nyla's shoulder. Ortega raised the cuffs. Phones zoomed, passengers craned, the crowd hungry for spectacle. But Nyla's voice stopped them mid-motion. "You are seconds away from committing a mistake that will echo far beyond this flight." Her tone wasn't pleading. It was a warning. Miller hesitated. Ortega frowned. Even Pierce blinked, his authority cracking for a heartbeat. Karen laughed again, too loud, trying to reclaim control. "Don't listen. She's nothing." The words rang hollow, like a note struck off key, because deep down, a few passengers were starting to wonder. If she was truly powerless, why was she so calm? Why didn't fear touch her eyes? Why did her voice sound like someone used to commanding rooms filled with power? The cabin's collective certainty wavered, but only slightly. Most still cheered for removal. Peter pressed his radio harder. "Security, expedite backup. We have a disruptive passenger refusing orders." His words, meant to strengthen control, instead carried an edge of nervousness. The clock ticked. 10 minutes to departure. Nyla looked at the sea of hostile faces, then at the cameras broadcasting her humiliation to thousands. She let the silence stretch, tension rising like a bowstring pulled taut. Then she smiled again. It was not defiance, not arrogance. It was the smile of inevitability. She knew something none of them did. She knew the moment the truth surfaced, the entire stage would collapse under their feet. Karen adjusted her uniform, convinced she had won. Chloe whispered for likes. Passengers clapped impatiently, and yet, in the middle of that storm, Nyla Carter stood like stone. The truth was seconds away, and when it struck, it would not just change a flight. It would change everything. The seconds ticked like drum beats. 10 minutes to departure. The cabin was a theater of judgment. Passengers filming, crew posturing, officers ready to bind Nyla Carter's wrists. Karen Doyle, drunk on applause, ground the torn ticket fragments beneath her heel. "This is what happens to fakes," she declared. "Trash belongs in the trash." She scooped the pieces up and flung them at Nyla's face. The crowd roared approval. Someone began a slow clap. Nyla brushed the scraps from her hair. She did not break. She did not even blink. Instead, she said quietly, "Karen, you might want to look more closely at what you just destroyed." Karen snorted. "Please, I know fraud when I see it." Yet a fragment near her shoe caught her eye. Letters half visible. "Attendant execu." Her stomach lurched. She kicked it away before others could see. Peter Lang's radio buzzed. A voice urgent, crackling through static. "Steve, corporate is asking about social media reports. Is everything under control?" He lowered the volume fast, but passengers nearby had heard. Murmurs rippled. Corporate? Reports? Doubt flickered, thin but present. Chloe Hart's live stream count surged past 15,000. "This is insane, you guys." Security's about to arrest her. Hashtag first-class fraud is trending everywhere. Comments flooded. "Get her out already. She's wasting everyone's time." Tase her if she resists. Miller raised his cuffs again. Ortega stepped closer. Ma'am, last chance. Comply, or you'll be removed in restraints. Nyla's calm voice cut through. Before you arrest me, would you mind if I showed you something from my bag? No! Karen shrieked, panic cracking her veneer. She's distracting you. She could have a weapon. Passengers gasped, some leaning back in fear. The officers stiffened, hands hovering near holsters. I understand your caution, Nyla said evenly. But I think once you see this, you'll understand everything. She moved slowly, deliberately, retrieving a worn leather portfolio. Her fingers unclasped it with measured calm. From within, she withdrew a laminated badge that caught the overhead lights, gleaming with official authority. Officer Ortega frowned. What's that? The badge's words were unmistakable. Nyla Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Aurora Air. For one heartbeat, silence. Then the cabin erupted in disbelief. That's fake, Karen barked. Her voice shook now. Anyone can print an ID card. Nyla wasn't finished. She pulled out a second document, thick, embossed with the gold leaf Aurora Air logo. This is my official appointment letter, she said steadily. Signed by Chairman Richard Hale, January 2021. Formally naming me CEO of Aurora Air. Peter's radio slipped from his trembling hand, clattering to the carpet. Captain Pierce lunged for the letter, eyes devouring the legal seals, the watermarks impossible to forge. His face drained to ash. This cannot be real, he stammered, voice cracking. The livestream exploded. Chloe's comments detonated in capital letters. Wait, what? Is she serious? CEO? The counter rocketed toward 25,000. Nyla's hand moved calmly to her phone. She dialed a number, pressed speaker. The cabin held its breath. A professional voice answered, Executive Office of the Chief Executive Officer, Aurora Air. This is Janet. Hello, Janet, Nyla said smoothly. Please confirm my identity for the crew and passengers. They seem unconvinced. Of course, Miss Carter, came the crisp reply. Ladies and gentlemen, you are speaking with Nyla Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Air, appointed by the board in 2021. She is traveling today for tomorrow's board meeting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen's face drained of blood. Peter swayed where he stood. Pierce looked ready to collapse. Miller slowly lowered his cuffs. Ortega muttered, My God. Passengers who had cheered seconds earlier now sat frozen, faces pale, with the realization they had witnessed something irreversible. On Chloe's feed, comments flipped instantly. This is the greatest plot twist ever. Karma is real. I'm crying. Justice. Viewer count. 30,000 and climbing. Karen tried to speak, voice strangled. I didn't know. I couldn't have known. But every eye in the cabin knew the truth. She hadn't needed to know Nyla's name. She had only needed to offer respect. And she had failed. The mask of authority cracked, and beneath it prejudice was exposed for all to see. Nyla Carter had been underestimated, but not anymore. The countdown still ticked toward departure, but the flight had already crossed a point of no return. Shock hung in the air like static before a lightning strike. Phones still filmed, but hands trembled now, no longer confident they were recording a criminal's downfall, but something far larger, an empire tilting in real time. Karen Doyle stood frozen, her triumphant smirk collapsing into a mask of terror. Peter Lang fumbled with his useless radio. Captain Alan Pierce held the appointment letter as though staring longer might make the seals vanish. But the gold embossing remained, undeniable. And Nyla Carter, calm in the storm, continued her unveiling. From her portfolio, she produced a second document, thicker, bound with corporate seals. "This is my stock ownership certificate," she explained. "I personally hold 12% of Aurora Air. That makes me the second largest individual shareholder, behind only the founding trust. In other words, I don't just lead this airline, I own it." The words detonated across the cabin. Gasps. Cries. A woman in pearls whispered, "Dear God!" On Chloe Hart's live stream, comments erupted. "She owns the airline!" Biggest twist in history. Justice in real time. Viewers surged past 40,000. Captain Pierce's lips moved soundlessly. His eyes traced the signatures, the watermarks, the indelible marks of truth. His career crumbled in the reflection of that paper. Nyla wasn't finished. She slid out a manila folder stamped, "Confidential. Board of Directors, eyes only." Her tone remained level, steady, controlled. "And here's something else you should all know." She opened it to reveal photographs, incident reports, testimonies. 47 documented discrimination complaints filed against this crew over the past 18 months. The same flight attendants, the same manager, the same captain. A ripple of horror surged through the passengers. Several leaned forward, straining to see. Karen stumbled back a step as Nyla held up a photo of her refusing service to a Muslim passenger. Peter's face appeared in a report describing him ejecting a Hispanic family from first class. Another page showed Pierce accused of inappropriate remarks about female passengers. Phones zoomed in, capturing the damning images. Chloe's feed exploded. 47 incidents? This is systemic racism! Live on camera! Unbelievable. Karen began to sob. Not quiet tears of guilt, but jagged sobs of someone watching her life collapse in minutes. "I didn't know," she stammered, but no one listened. Peter's hands shook so badly, he dropped his radio again. This is being misinterpreted. Misinterpreted? Nyla's voice cut like glass. 47 times? 47 families humiliated? 47 passengers judged by appearances, just as you judged me. Her phone buzzed insistently. She ignored it. She had the cabin's attention now, and the world's. On screen, Chloe's live stream comments rolled like a tidal wave. "This is bigger than one flight. This is history. Expose them all." Then, Nyla's phone rang again, and this time she answered, pressing speaker for all to hear. "This is James Richardson," came the voice, gravely, authoritative. "Chairman of Aurora Air's board. Maya, are you safe?" "Yes, James. Physically safe. But I've uncovered violations that demand immediate attention." The cabin froze. The chairman himself was listening. "I'm watching the live stream," Richardson continued. "Half the board is watching. The Department of Transportation has called an emergency session. What's happening here is catastrophic for the company, but also transformative." Gasps rippled. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, realizing their complicity had been broadcast globally. Nyla spoke into the phone, her voice calm but resonant. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is systemic discrimination. And it ends today." Karen collapsed into a seat, sobbing. "Please, I didn't know who you were." Officer Ortega turned toward her, horrified. "You slapped the CEO of your own airline?" His professional mask cracked. Miller quietly holstered his cuffs, retreating a step. Captain Pierce tried one last defense. "Miss Carter, if we had known—" "That's the problem," Nyla interrupted, her voice steady as stone. "You didn't bother to know. You looked at my clothes, my skin, and assumed I didn't belong. That assumption is about to cost you everything." Her words fell heavy, not shouted but deliberate, each syllable hammering the coffin shut on their authority. Chloe whispered into her phone, awed now instead of smug. "You guys, this is the most incredible reversal I've ever seen. She's turning the entire system upside down. Viewer count, 50,000 and climbing." For the first time since boarding, Nyla's smile wasn't unsettling. It was commanding. The storm had turned, and the power now belonged entirely to her. The cabin felt like a trial chamber. Passengers sat frozen, the crew trembled, the officers stood paralyzed. Phones still recorded, broadcasting to tens of thousands who were watching history happen in real time. Nyla Carter placed the manila folder back into her leather portfolio with calm precision, then lifted her eyes to the cabin. Her voice carried the weight of authority sharpened by truth. Karen Doyle, Peter Lang, Captain Pierce. She spoke each name slowly, deliberately, as if etching them into stone. "You will decide your own fate right here, in front of these passengers, in front of the world. I'm offering you two choices." Karen's shoulders shook. Peter swallowed hard, his face pale. Pierce stood stiffly, though his hands trembled behind his back. "Option 1, Nyla continued. Immediate suspension without pay. 120 hours of mandatory bias training. Public apology published in every major outlet. And probationary status for 2 years. Murmurs swept through the cabin. Some passengers leaned forward, astonished by the severity. Others nodded, seeing justice take shape. Nyla's gaze sharpened. Option 2, termination for cause. Permanent ban from the airline industry. You will be held personally liable for damages, legal fees, settlements, stock losses, and federal charges for civil rights violations. The silence was absolute. Even Chloe Hart stopped whispering into her phone, her camera capturing every twitch of emotion. Viewer count soared past 60,000. Karen broke first. Her voice cracked like glass. "Option 1, please. I have children. I can't lose everything." Captain Pierce nodded, defeated. Option 1. Peter's lips quivered. His eyes darted to the passengers, to the phones, to Nyla's steady gaze. There was no escape. "Option 1, he whispered. "Excellent," Nyla said coldly. "Your decisions are now public record, witnessed by thousands, recorded forever." Karen collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Peter sat down hard, head in his hands. Pierce clenched his jaw, his career dissolving in front of strangers. But Nyla wasn't finished. She turned toward Chloe's camera, staring directly into the lens. "This is not just about 3 employees. This is about every person who cheered when I was humiliated, every witness who stayed silent. The next time you see discrimination, you will have to choose. Are you part of the problem or part of the solution?" The words cut deeper than any threat. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, shame creeping into their faces. The businessman, who had shouted earlier now, stared at the floor. The elderly woman in pearls clutched her necklace, but said nothing. On the live stream, comments poured in. "She's right. We all watched. Never again. This is bigger than one flight." Karen sobbed harder. "Please. I didn't know who you were." Nyla's reply was surgical. "You didn't need to know my name. Respect should never depend on a title." Her phone buzzed again. She answered on speaker. "Ms. Carter, this is Secretary Porter, Department of Transportation. We're launching a federal investigation into discriminatory practices across all major airlines. We'd like your cooperation." "You have it," Nyla replied smoothly. "But reforms begin now. Not next week, not next year. Now." The cabin held its breath. "Effective immediately," Nyla declared, "Aurora Air will mandate 40 hours of unconscious bias training for every crew member within 60 days. We're launching a passenger rights app for real-time discrimination reports. Every confirmed complaint will trigger an automatic investigation, and executive bonuses will now be tied directly to minority passenger satisfaction. The passengers gasped. Some clapped, this time not in mockery, but in awe. Chloe whispered, "She's rewriting the airline in front of us." Karen looked up through tears. What happens to us?" "You will begin by apologizing," Nyla said. "Not to me, but to every passenger who has ever been dismissed, doubted, or humiliated. And you will teach others, so no one repeats your mistakes." The cabin was no longer hostile. It was reverent, hushed, watching the impossible unfold. And for the first time since she had been struck across the face, Nyla Carter was no longer standing alone. The tide had turned, and it was only the beginning. The cabin no longer felt like a flight. It had become a tribunal at 30,000 feet. The rows of leather seats were pews, the passengers reluctant jurors, and the crew defendants awaiting their fate. Dozens of phones streamed to the world, each tiny lens a witness. Nyla Carter stood at the center, portfolio still in her grip. She had revealed her identity, stripped away their false authority, and exposed the rot beneath polished uniforms. Now she delivered the sentence. "Before this plane departs," she said, voice calm but carrying to every corner, "accountability begins." Her eyes found Karen Doyle first. The attendant who had slapped her now sat slumped, mascara streaked, confidence gone. "Karen Doyle," Nyla said evenly, "effective immediately, you are suspended without pay. Within 48 hours, you will report for review on 3 charges: physical assault of a passenger, destruction of valid travel documents, and filing false reports." Karen's voice cracked. "Please, I didn't know." "You didn't need to know my name," Nyla interrupted. "Respect is not reserved for titles. It belongs to every passenger." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Chloe Hart's camera zoomed closer, her live stream count racing toward 80,000. Comments blazed. "Accountability at last. Justice. She deserves this." Nyla turned to Peter Lang, who sat pale, his radio forgotten on the carpet. "Peter Lang," she continued, "you are demoted to ground crew. Your salary is cut to entry level. Before you ever supervise again, you will complete 160 hours of training in equity and bias awareness. Authority is not a weapon. You misused it. Now it becomes your lesson." Peter's lips trembled. "I have a mortgage. Children in college. You should have remembered them before assuming I was a criminal," Nyla replied coldly. Finally, she faced Captain Alan Pierce. His uniform still gleamed, but his medals looked like tin under the weight of truth. "Captain Pierce, your senior status is revoked. You are reassigned to domestic short-haul flights. Your pay cut 40%. Before you fly internationally again, you will undergo full evaluation and retraining. Years of service mean nothing without dignity." Pierce lowered his head. Silence was his only answer. The passengers stared, stunned. The officers stood motionless. The balance of power had flipped entirely. Nyla turned to Chloe's phone, speaking directly to the digital crowd. "Justice is not about uniforms or titles. It is about dignity. And today, dignity is restored." The live stream exploded. "This is history. CEO Queen, Karma Live." But Nyla pressed further. She tapped her phone. "James, patch me through to the board." Static filled the cabin, then the voices of Aurora Air executives and the chairman himself. An entire corporate hierarchy held its breath. Effective immediately, Nyla declared. Aurora Air will adopt reforms. She raised her hand, counting off each measure like law. First, every crew member will wear body cameras, all footage reviewed by our passenger equity division. Second, every discrimination complaint triggers automatic suspension pending investigation, no exceptions. Third, independent oversight committees with the NAACP and ACLU will review complaints and impose penalties. Fourth, executive bonuses will tie directly to equity metrics and minority passenger satisfaction. There was stunned silence on the line. Then Secretary Porter's voice cut through. Ms. Carter, these reforms are unprecedented. They are overdue, Nyla answered. A hush swept the cabin. Then came a single clap. Another followed. Soon the entire first-class section erupted into applause, no longer mocking, but awestruck. Karen lifted her tear-streaked face. What happens to me now? You will serve probation, Nyla said firmly. Your duty will be speaking at training sessions across this industry. You will tell your story, your failure, your prejudice, so others never repeat it. Karen nodded, sobbing. I will. Peter sat hollow, staring at the floor. Pierce's hands shook against his sides. Nyla faced the passengers. Her voice softened but cut even deeper. This is not only about 3 employees. It is about every witness who laughed, every bystander who stayed silent. Next time you see injustice, you must decide. Silence or courage. Shame rippled across the rows. The businessman who had cheered earlier now avoided her eyes. The woman in pearls gripped her necklace and bowed her head. Chloe whispered into her phone, her tone reverent now. She's rewriting the airline live. We are watching history. Nyla snapped her portfolio shut, her final words carrying through the cabin. Change begins today. Not in press releases, not in boardrooms, but here, in this cabin. And for the first time, everyone believed her. News does not fly. It detonates. By the time Flight 228's cabin settled into stunned silence, the live stream had already crossed continents. At 80,000 viewers, Chloe Hart's feed was no longer a stream. It was a tidal wave of outrage, fascination, and vindication. Headlines began flashing on passengers' phones mid-flight. Aurora Air CEO slapped in first-class incident. Airline stock plummets after viral video. Department of Transportation opens civil rights investigation. Passengers who had once sneered now sat frozen, realizing their complicity was preserved forever, replayed in clips shared millions of times. In the aisle, Nyla Carter remained composed. She had weathered humiliation, exposed corruption, and delivered justice. Now her words would ripple far beyond this aircraft. Her phone buzzed. She answered on speaker. The chairman's voice came through, raw with tension. Miss Carter, the board is in emergency session. CNN, BBC, every major outlet is demanding statements. The stock is down 6%. What should we do? Nyla's reply was steady, almost surgical. You tell them reform has already begun. This airline will no longer tolerate systemic discrimination. We will set the standard for the entire industry, the passengers murmured. Even those who had jeered earlier now stared with reluctant respect. But Nyla wasn't speaking only to them. She lifted her head, letting her voice carry to the cameras still streaming. Aurora Air does not just fly passengers across the sky. We carry human dignity, and today, that dignity is non-negotiable. The comment section lit up. I'm crying. She's rewriting the world. Every CEO should see this. Down the aisle, Karen Doyle sobbed quietly, mascara staining her collar. Peter Lang sat hollow, his career ashes in his lap. Captain Pierce stared at his shoes, medals useless. Their downfall was no longer private, it was global. And yet, amid collapse, Nyla offered them something rare: redemption. "You will rebuild by teaching others," she said to them all. "Not from the comfort of authority, but from the pain of your mistakes. Growth, not punishment, is the true path to justice." Her words struck deeper than any firing. Karen's sobs shifted, no longer only fear but shame. Peter nodded faintly. Pierce exhaled, as though surrendering pride for the first time in decades. Meanwhile, the world outside erupted. Hashtags trended globally. Carter effect, justice at 30K feet, end airline bias. Civil rights leaders called Nyla's confrontation a watershed moment. Politicians demanded hearings. The Department of Transportation released a statement within the hour. "A new era of accountability has begun." On the plane, Chloe whispered into her phone, her tone reverent. "We just witnessed history. The Carter effect is real." Her viewer count hit 100,000. Nyla closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. She had not sought spectacle. She had sought truth. Yet truth had become spectacle anyway, one too powerful to contain. She opened her portfolio once more and addressed the passengers. Aurora Air generated nearly $50 billion last year. But what is profit without principle? Every act of discrimination costs millions in lawsuits, billions in trust. From this moment, we choose change, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. A businessman in the front, who had earlier mocked her, cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, I was wrong. I judged you. I'm sorry." Others followed. A woman whispered, "I should have spoken up." Another said, "I laughed when you were humiliated. I regret it." For the first time, the cabin was not an arena of cruelty, but of confession. Nyla accepted none of their excuses, but she allowed their words to stand. Change begins with acknowledgement. Her phone rang again, this time the Secretary of Transportation. The voice filled the cabin. "Ms. Carter, the government invites you to help lead a nationwide review of airline practices. Will you cooperate?" "Yes," Nyla said simply. "But understand, change will not wait for Washington. It begins here, now." Passengers clapped again, stronger this time, not as a performance, but as a release. The sound was thunderous, reverberating like the roar of takeoff. And so, in that narrow cabin, surrounded by trembling crew and shame passengers, the Carter effect was born. It would not stop with Aurora Air. It would spread to every airline, every boardroom, every policy. Because one woman, dismissed as a fraud, had refused to kneel and instead made the world stand. 3 months had passed since the slap that shook the skies, yet its echo still traveled through every terminal, every gate, every boardroom. What began as humiliation in one cabin had become a reform movement that reshaped aviation. They called it the Carter effect. From her corner office on the 47th floor of Aurora Air headquarters, Nyla Carter studied the latest quarterly report. The numbers told a story sharper than any headline. Discrimination complaints, down 78%. Minority passenger satisfaction, up 45%. Employee training completion, 99.7%. Aurora Air stock, 23% higher than before the scandal. But the numbers that mattered most were zeros. 0 passengers slapped. 0 tickets torn. 0 travelers humiliated for their appearance. Nyla closed the folder and stared out at the Texas skyline. She remembered the sting of Karen Doyle's hand, the laughter of passengers, the shame broadcast to thousands. And she remembered the moment she had reversed it all, turning a cabin into a courtroom, prejudice into accountability. Her phone buzzed. A message glowed on the screen from Karen herself. Completed my 40th bias training session. Speaking in Detroit tomorrow. Thank you for giving me the chance to grow instead of ending me. K. Nyla smiled faintly. Redemption was possible. Karen, once the face of cruelty, was now teaching compassion. Peter Lang had accepted his demotion quietly, working ground crew, stripped of arrogance. Captain Pierce now flew only short-haul domestic flights, his medals still polished, but his voice subdued. Even Chloe Hart, once chasing clout, had reshaped her platform into a social justice channel with millions of followers. Her new bio read, "Witnessing change, promoting equity." The Carter effect spread beyond Aurora. United, Delta, Southwest, and international carriers rushed to adopt the same reforms: body cameras, equity audits, real-time reporting apps. The Department of Transportation codified them into law. Civil rights leaders hailed it as the most significant industry shift in 50 years. Nyla's assistant entered. "Ms. Carter, the Secretary of Transportation is online too, and Oprah's team wants an interview slot." Nyla exhaled. She had avoided cameras since that day, but perhaps her story wasn't the one the world needed. Weeks later, when Oprah finally interviewed her, Nyla didn't recount humiliation. She spotlighted change. "This isn't about me being CEO," she said. "It's about the millions who endure humiliation every day without cameras to defend them. The Carter effect isn't my story. It's theirs." The broadcast became a global event. Instead of centering on her, Nyla highlighted ordinary heroes. A teacher confronting bias in her classroom, a store manager revising hiring practices, a passenger who defended a stranger mid-flight. Each story began with the same line. "I saw what Nyla Carter did, and I decided to act too." Back in the skies, Nyla still traveled anonymously, always in jeans and sneakers, always watching. On a flight to Chicago, she noticed a young black man in a hoodie step into first class. Months earlier, suspicion would have followed him. Now, the attendant smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, sir. May I help with your bag?" No questions, no sneers, just respect. Progress. Nyla opened her laptop and drafted her weekly blog, a ritual she had begun after the scandal. 3 months ago, I was slapped because people assumed I didn't belong. But real change doesn't happen when one person with power speaks. It happens when everyone chooses to see differently. The Carter effect is not my story. It is ours. It begins when ordinary people choose courage over silence. She paused, then typed the final line. The next Nyla Carter may not be a CEO. She may be a student, a mother, a traveler without a voice. When that moment comes, will you stay silent or will you stand? She posted it. Within minutes, thousands responded, sharing their own acts of courage. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Chairman Richardson. "Discrimination down 89% industry-wide. You changed everything." Nyla replied, "We all did. That's how real progress works." She leaned back, her eyes on the horizon, where silver aircraft carved trails across the blue. Once, that sky had been a place of humiliation. Now, it was a canvas of justice, because one woman had refused to kneel, and in doing so, she had made the world rise. What you have just witnessed is more than a story. It is a mirror held up to the world we live in. Discrimination, prejudice, silent complicity, they are not confined to airplanes. They happen every day, in classrooms, offices, shops, and streets. The question is not whether injustice exists. The question is, what will you do when you see it? Will you turn away, convinced it isn't your problem? Will you laugh or film or stay silent because it feels easier? Or will you stand, speak, and act? Real change never begins in boardrooms or government halls. It begins in ordinary moments, with ordinary people making extraordinary choices. The Carter effect is not just about one woman who refused to kneel. It is about everyone who dares to rise. So I ask you, as you close this story, the next time you see someone treated unfairly, what role will you play? Will you be part of the problem or part of the solution? If this story moved you, share it. Start conversations. Speak up. Because change begins when you choose courage over silence.